Born in 1946 in Hancock, and I lived in Boston location on the top of Quincy Hill. It was a nice little community back in those days. Some of the mines were still operating, in Keweenaw County, and you had smelters that were still running and stuff. So it was a lot of people there and a lot of kids growing up there and stuff. It's changed a lot now, but that's that's where I grew up in Boston. Went to Hancock schools, and graduated from Hancock schools. Well, growing up, friend-wise, there was lots of other boys growing up in Boston, and in those days, I mean, we spent most of our time outdoors when we could. There were 70 nights a summer from the time we were, 12 years old, and mothers were never worried about that, and fathers, because you were with friends and whatever, and you took your dogs with you outside, and they stayed around the campfire and barked a little bit if some animal came around or whatever, and that's how we grew up. When it came to and I started working with my dad, who my dad was part owner of 3 different businesses, IGA Grocery Market, Worla Hardware Store in Calumet, and Walgreen Drugstore in Calumet. So I started working with my dad when I was probably in middle school. My dad was a plumber, and I worked with him putting in furnaces, doing plumbing work, ripping out old furnaces, replacing water lines, doing all those things when I was young. When I was just middle school and stuff, I basically hauled tools for him, ran back and forth to his truck for all the different pipe fitting tools and things that we needed. As I got older, of course, then I was able to actually, do some of the installing of furnaces and the kind of work that he did. That's when I was, and then other odd jobs I did when I was in high school is one, family in Boston had a house that didn't have a basement. They just had a little crawl space where they had a furnace, and they wanted to have a little basement. So I started off, I dug out 2 sections of that basement. We did it with a pick and a shovel, and they had a little window down there. Then you had to throw the dirt outside of the window, load it in 5-gallon buckets, dump it outside of the window, go from outside the window, load it in the back of a truck, go and haul it away and shovel it. So I did 2 sections of a basement, so that they had some room to put in the furnace and stuff. I got $15 a section. I was probably, when I was doing that, I was probably 15, 16 years old. And then I worked for an uncle who basically ran the grocery store. Along with the grocery store, there were lots of people that had farms around Boston, and so you had to feed cows with cow feed, and you had fertilizers you put in the fields and everything else. So we used to take a big dump truck, drive to Superior, Wisconsin, load 100-pound feed sacks or fertilizer sacks in the back of the truck, drive home, unload them into these storage buildings. That was, we were teenagers, we did that. I'll go down with a dump truck, throw 100-pound feed sacks into the dump truck, bring them back to the store in Boston, stack them in the storage buildings. And your fingers would get raw from grabbing that burlap on those feed sacks to try to
right at the ends.
Yeah, and then that's those are the kinds of jobs I had basically when I was in high school. Working with my dad and working, different odd jobs. When I was just out of high school, then I had a scholarship to play football at Michigan Tech. So one of the things that I got as a result of that was I got a job at Celotex in Lawrence. And so I worked the different shifts. Morning shift started at 7 in the morning, ran till 3. Then you had afternoon shift till 11, and then night shift ran till 7 in the morning. So I did that the summer before my freshman year, in college. Well, the Quincy Smelter job, that was when I was just before I got married. That was in 1968. We were working at the Quincy Smelter. That was one of the last years that it's now a part of the Keweenaw Historical National Park, but then it was a smelter. We used to have train cars that would come in with 4,000-pound bales of copper, just scrap copper. And what we used to do is we would take those 4,000-pound bales and put them into a big furnace, and that would melt down 100 tons of copper. And then you tap the furnace, and then the copper would come out molten in molds, 800-pound molds that had spots. So the copper would go into the molds to make ingots. And then, so we had the hardest jobs because we were, 20 years old, 19 years old. And then when you dump the hot copper into the water, and it would go around on a conveyor belt, and then you had gloves on you to pick those copper ingots up, which probably weighed 15 pounds a piece, and stack them, and then you take them and put them on trains, and that would haul them out. I played, grew up in Boston. We all played sports. I mean, you played baseball when it was baseball season. You played football when it was football season. You played hockey when it was hockey season. Basketball whenever you could. So I mean, I grew up playing tons of baseball. I played baseball with the Boston Pirates, who was like a Twilight League team, which was mostly adults. But I played the first couple of games I played with them. I was like 14, 15 years old. Yeah. Because if they needed a guy or whatever, and then I of course I went on and played tons of like I played high school football, and a good friend of mine and I were the co-captains on the football team, and we did pretty good with that. And then we played high school basketball. There was no high school hockey then. Yeah. So a guy who was my basketball coach talked me into switching from hockey to basketball. And I still played hockey, but I played high school basketball. In basketball we ended up being really good. Our senior season we had 19 wins and no losses. And then we finally got beat in the playoffs, and that was the end of that. And when I ended up going to Tech to play football. I played 1 year of football at Tech. I played as a freshman, and ended up getting a letter. I was one of 3 freshmen that got a letter, and this was a situation right here where this new coach came in. He was a line coach, and he was a mean guy. And I look back on it, and it changed my life because in spring football, you had spring football in college. Yeah. So I had spring football. I had a blister that was right down to the bone, and I was in agony. And the head coach, who's a great guy, I still know him to this day. He comes to the golf course. Bill Lucier told me, he said, "Well, Zip," he said, "just you wear tennis shoes and get that taken care of by the trainer." He said, "You don't put football shoes on." Those are too, because football shoes were crude in those days. They were fancy shoes like you guys have nowadays. And he basically told me, he said, "You take those tennis shoes off, you pussy, put those football shoes back on." So I basically started losing interest in football. I said, to hell with this. I was, so I